How's it going, everyone? It's your boy, Jack Slack, Fights Gone By Podcast, episode 99, approaching the big 100. Certainly never expected to get this far. But we started from the bottom and now we're here. It's Tuesday the 18th of September, and I'm going to try and be super cheerful, but I'm a little bit bummed out for reasons we'll get into at the end of the news. So if I'm 10% less hilarious than usual, that's why. But yeah, we had a UFC Moscow, which was just a pile of shit. I mean, imagine that you're a regular Russian dude and you spent your day working at the, homophobia factory. You come home, you eat your beluga caviar, put on your best Adidas tracksuit, and you head out the door for the big fight that you've been waiting for years to get because the UFC won't come to town. And then you get that abortion. But on the other side of it, we also had Canelo versus Golovkin, which was tremendous, no matter how you look at it. Are we going to do all the bitching about scoring? Probably not. But we will talk about how good the fight was. Anyway, before we get into that, let's do some news. Jimmy Manuwa is out of his light heavyweight meeting with Thiago Santos, who himself was replacing someone else for that light heavyweight meeting. So middleweight Eric Anders steps in to replace light heavyweight Jimmy Manuwa against replacement light heavyweight but actual middleweight Thiago Santos. Fuck this division so much. There was a joke about all the mid-tier middleweights moving up and just taking over the light heavyweight division, and they have. This is what's happening. It's still a light heavyweight fight between two top 30 ranked middleweights. No idea what happened to Manuwa. Didn't really keep up with it. To be honest, this news just sort of passed me by because nobody seems to care. Nobody was like tweeting, "Oh my god, event ruined," because the event isn't that strong anyway. I think maybe we'll have a quick brush over it later today, but it was just a dreadful card, and they really phoned in the main event, and then the main event fell apart, and you've actually ended up with a better main event between Eric Anders and Thiago Santos. That's two exciting middleweight prospects. Well, Thiago Santos is getting a bit old to be a prospect, but that's two exciting middleweights who are decently ranked and looking to move up. Problem is that it's happening at light heavyweight, but short notice and all that. Okay, right, I've got some fight announcements here, but probably best to just touch on the idea of Bellator Hawaii first. This is Scott Coker's newest zany scheme, and people are applauding him, and I think fair enough. The UFC aren't ever going to Hawaii. They have BJ Penn there. They have a huge following in Hawaii. They got Max Holloway, current champion, and those two came from completely different gyms, unrelated to each other. So there's obviously a community there. Got plenty of Hawaiian fighters around, Brad Tavares and people like that. Bring back Kendall Grove. But yeah, the UFC are just not interested in doing it. Meanwhile, Bellator, not hamstrung by any need to put on a pay-per-view or anything like that and maximise the number of buys, said, fuck it, let's do a fight in a weird time zone. And the card, I'll be honest, looking pretty good. They're leading with Alima McFarlane, she of the Smashing the Soccer Mum, against, I think it was Valerie Letourneau. It's women's flyweight, and it's the title, so nobody really cares. But Alima came out and said, yeah, I think it would be great if this card was heavily women or all women, and everyone else was just like, no, Lima, just fight and don't say things like that. Not only, if you had all the best women in the world, if you were Invicta pre-UFC being interested, or you were the UFC, someone was saying, if you had Nunes versus Cyborg and Valentina versus Jacek and Rose versus Jessica Andrade, that would be the makings of an all-female card that was actually awesome. But that's 4 champions in action, and when have you ever seen that in the UFC? What's more, the UFC, even though their women's divisions are not great, they are the most stacked women's divisions in the world. The Bellator women's divisions are not divisions. Have to put up with reading these Bellator bots posting news about Sinead Kavanagh every week. And you're like, nobody gives a fuck. She can't win fights against the women that don't exist in that division. But the actual Bellator Hawaii card, as announced, really good. They just announced King Mo versus Liam McGeary for sort of like biggest derailed hype train. Get to decide out of that. I used to love watching Liam McGeary. I still enjoy watching Liam McGeary, but he's sort of dropped off a cliff since all the quality light heavyweights started turning up in Bellator. And King Mo, all the potential in the world, but never actually got any better. Just sort of stands there pretending to be a boxer and then occasionally gets a takedown. Or knocked out. I was watching that, you caught me, I was watching one of those terrible MMA compilations on YouTube that was called, like, When Trash Talk Gets Friendly, or something like that. And it was King Mo and Rampage, or Hampage, before their second fight, when Rampage came back at like 240 something, clearly not training, not in shape, and they made it a heavyweight fight because he couldn't get down to light heavyweight, basically. The entire reason that he was in the heavyweight tournament is because he can't be asked. And Scott Coker's still throwing money at him. But King Mo's like, yeah, I'll take him 5 rounds. If he wants 5 rounds, I'll give him 5 rounds. But he doesn't want 5 rounds. And Rampage, with his big fat face, just looks at the audience and goes, no, I don't want 5 rounds. Oh, but yeah, King Mo and Liam McGeary, both very much prospects gone by. Our sister podcast, where I watch regional MMA and despair. The co-main of that Bellator Hawaii card, and probably the one that people are going to tune in for and care about, is Rafael Carvalho versus Lyoto Machida. Carvalho, obviously, straight off the loss to Musashi, but was a long-reigning middleweight champion in Bellator. Problem is, Bellator doesn't have a middleweight division. So old man Machida is going to come in. If he beats Carvalho, that sets up the rematch with Musashi, and Musashi gets to, I don't know, expunge the butthurt of being completely styled on the first time they fought, now that Machida's 45 years old or whatever. But that's Musashi fans in a nutshell. We're all about moving the goalposts until he is the best. And then Naaman Gracie versus Ed Ruth. You got the Bellator welterweight tournament opening round. The opening round of the super dangerous brackets that keep him away from Michael Venom Page bracket, the one with all the grapplers in very conspicuously. But that's my sleeper fight of the tournament, to be honest. Naaman Gracie is a fun sort of guy, but he's never struck me as like incredibly dangerous when he hits the mat. It's not like Jacare where he's just going to snap something off. He takes a good amount of time even against fairly mediocre opponents to get his submissions. Whereas Ed Ruth is super explosive. I called him explosive. He's black and I called him explosive. Blacksplosive t-shirts actually now available, but I'll do the plug later. But, with the wrestling advantage, he could probably keep it on the feet and bang him out with punches, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I think Ed Ruth is the dark horse of this tournament. Not particularly hot take. Everyone else is saying that. It would be a hot take to say, I think Amasov, or Amasarov, or whatever his name is, the alternate fighting Lawrence Larkin, is the dark horse of this tournament. So yeah, not bad. Bellator Hawaii, power to him. And of course, having a Machida on a Hawaii card, huge Japanese community in Hawaii, good work. What else is happening? BJ Penn. BJ Penn's back, everyone. BJ Penn has got that look in his eye. He's hungry, and he wants Ryan Hall for dinner. And Ryan Hall is likely to hook kick him in the face several dozen times. In a weird fight, and then I love Ryan to bits, but then probably disappear for another year or two. Ryan has been in that weird position, well, not a weird position, but Ryan has been in the position that everyone's in, where they don't want to fight someone below them, they want to fight someone above them, which is, of course, the brave thing to do, because you want to fight the best fighters you can, but also doesn't really work because, you can't make matches like that. So he's been sitting out for a while, wanting a higher level opponent. Now he's coming back to BJ Penn, who's not really a higher level opponent than Gray Maynard in any sense of the word. But at least it's a big name for him to beat, I suppose. And for Penn, Ryan isn't a very well-known striker. He kickboxed Gray Maynard's face off, but you got to think BJ's going to be a lot more comfortable jumping into Ryan's guard if he knocks him off balance while he's kicking, or if he takes him down. BJ, one of the best guard passes in MMA history. He's going to have lost a lot of his athleticism with age, but still very sound on the ground, where Gray Maynard was more sort of wrestle banger. Anyway, I'm not sad about this fight. I mean, in terms of BJ Penn opponents, I would rather watch him fight Ryan Hall, where, maybe he has an edge in the boxing. Ryan Hall's a good kicker, and BJ Penn's still pretending that kicks don't exist, but it beats watching BJ Penn against some monstrous knockout artist who's just going to pound the shit out of him. At least this way, maybe Ryan Hall does knock him out, but it's not watching him get murdered by Mirsad Bektik or something like that. Plus, a pure submission victory over BJ Penn, as in, take his back and strangle him or whatever, that'd be a big feather in the cap at any point in your career. With that said, I do hope BJ Penn fucking retires after this and stays retired. Oh, and on the subject of retirements, Brennan Ward retired last week, I think it was. I said it on the podcast. Johnny Hendricks retired whenever he most recently got his ass kicked. But now both are back to fight in bare knuckle boxing. Because that seems to be what MMA fighters deem to be like easy money. Don't have to train as hard, can fight in the weight class above, don't have to worry about a load of the stuff that's available in MMA. And, a lot of the guys who do it aren't good boxers, I mean, someone got upset about me saying it was easy money for MMA fighters, rather. Obviously, if you're Melvin Gillard turning up to fight Jimmy Sweeney, that's not easy money, but in terms of training for it, it's easy money. You don't have to do as much training. And Beck Rawlins is one of the best in the world in it. So, it's easier money. And I suppose that brings us on to our depressing piece of news today. Norifumi Yamamoto, or Kid Yamamoto, has passed away from cancer, I believe of the liver, at age 41. Now, I didn't know Kid Yamamoto very well. I'd met him a few times. His gym was one of a few that I dropped in on during my trips to Japan. Mainly because it was welcoming to foreigners. Had a big sort of foreigner community there because it was one of the few gyms in Japan that was okay with dudes having tattoos, or rather showing tattoos, which is obviously not a big deal if you're going to like a judo dojo or a karate dojo where you're wearing a gi, but as soon as you strip down to do some Muay Thai or you're wearing just a rash guard, a sleeveless rash guard, and you've got your tattoos on show, people get very uncomfortable about it. Because tattoos are still sort of linked with the Yakuza over there. Young dudes get tattoos to show they're in the Yakuza, and they do what's called the self-mutilation thing, cut off the top joint of your little finger and stuff like that, which ironically is something that like proper Yakuza don't do because they know that the police know that to look for that stuff. So it's really sort of like young thuggy Yakuzas and posers that do that sort of stuff. But yeah, so it had a good community sort of with the foreigners, Yamamoto's gym. And they always say like, don't beat your heroes. And Kid Yamamoto was definitely not one of my heroes. I was a Genki Sudo man for a start, but he had this reputation as being a loose cannon and stuff like that. But every time I met him, he was an absolute gentleman, and his family and gym were absolutely lovely and welcoming. And it's weird to think, but Kid Yamamoto, he had that young firebrand reputation from like hitting people after the bell and stuff. When that dude said stuff about his sister, he was supposed to go for the Olympics at one point. His dad was a silver medalist, I believe, in the Munich Olympics as a wrestler. This is, and he was his dad's pride and joy, and he was going to go to the Olympics, and then he got in trouble via BB gun and an actual Yakuza, and Ensign Inoue had to sort of save him from this thing, and basically the Olympic Committee were like, yeah, involved at all with like Yakuza drama, we don't want you. So he ended up going to MMA just because there was nothing else that he could do in that time to make use of his wrestling skills. So he always had this sort of reputation, but like by the time I met him, he was probably, he might have been out injured for a while, or he might have had just come back. I can't remember which, but it's weird to think that he's been away from the limelight rather, for like 10 years, maybe more, and just focused on his own like gym and training guys like Kyoji Horiguchi, who was just like a kid starting out when I visited that gym the first time, and guys like Yasuki Hachi, he was also there, and to his own ventures like his curry restaurant and his friend the tattoo artist. His tattoos were, I'm not a lot of tattoos. I always think like if I got a tattoo, I'd have to make sure it was a really nice one. But like 90% of tattoos I see, I go, oh, I'd probably regret that after a couple of years. But Kid Yamamoto had the nicest tattoos I've ever seen, I think, on a person, or at least some of them. But yeah, so he'd been out of the limelight for 10, 12 years maybe, I don't know. But it's interesting to think, like, because he passed away this morning or last night, and he was only 41, which is, that's a life half lived. I'm sure he was making the most of his life, but we all assume that we're going to get to 60, 70 at least. Someone dies at 60, you go, God, that's pretty young. That's not a good run. But 41, like, you've just retired from fighting and you've only just started on effectively the rest of your life. If you have a full, long life, you live to 80 or 90 even, your athletic achievements are going to be something that you did in your youth. They're going to be like the first quarter of your life. And, the nickname Kid Yamamoto, it was getting a bit... When he was 35 and coming out for fights, you're going, Kid, really? It was like Mike Tyson being Kid Dynamite. You're not really a kid anymore. But in the grand scheme of things, 41 is a baby. That's tragic. And I mean that in the, I use tragic sarcastically a lot, but that's genuinely tragic. And the saddest part is that, he's had this back and forth relationship with his father over many, many years. But no dad should have to bury their son. That's appalling. So yeah, my heartfelt condolences go out to the Yamamoto family. Not really much more to say. Just really, really sad. It reminds me a lot of the Andy Hug one, where you just assume this person's fine, and Andy Hug was still fighting, and you assume this person's fine, and then suddenly they have some symptoms, and you go, oh, okay, what's happening there? And they find out that they've got a very, very serious form of cancer, and then they die almost immediately. So I'm still a bit reeling from that one, without making it about me, but that was just a real punch in the gut when I woke up this morning. Anyway, let's do some recaps. So UFC Fight Night in Moscow, we've already decided it was shit. What happened? God, some of these I just couldn't be asked. Mehmet Tysonov, after hyping him up this week, he goes out and has a fairly mediocre fight. Abilov and Johnson split a decision. Petr Yan got a decision. Got all these guys who were set up to have showcase fights, what's his name? Alexei Kunchenko. Just came in, did nothing. The Kunchenko-Alves fight was just dire. Fair play to Khalid Murtazaliev, because he actually got a stoppage against CB Dollaway, but he had to work for it because Herb Dean wanted CB Dollaway to die in the ring. That was among the worst stoppages I've ever seen. The dude was covering up, face down in the mat, doing the no more please sort of face, but not tapping because obviously fighters refuse to tap to strikes. But I think if you're face down to, with a guard up and doing nothing and just cowering from a blow, I think that's cowering. Not that he's a coward, but that's what we think of in that posture. I think that's a submission. That's a body language submission. God, that was terrible. And then the heavyweight fight between Andrei Arlovsky and Abdurahimov was just dire. Couple of nice takedowns from both men, but otherwise just shit. Jan Blachowicz versus Nikita Krylov. I was excited with Krylov's comeback. Throws a nice right-hand lead into a takedown attempt, very TJ Dillashaw-esque. Gets top position on Jan Blachowicz, and then Jan Blachowicz gets one hook in, elevates him with one hook, which was pretty badass. Comes up, Nikita Krylov grabs the guillotine and flops back to side control, exactly as he did against Overton Prue. Lets him pass, keeps the guillotine. Almost gets Von Prude or whatever we're calling it. And in the second round, Blachowicz gets on his back and submits it with an arm triangle while he was falling off him. So that was pretty cool. And then in the main event, Alexei Oleinik versus Mark Hunt. Hunt actually looked good. People were saying he looked good, and I was going, really? And then I watched the fight, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good, actually. Lots of circling, lots of movement, lots of low kicks, which Hunt never uses, but clearly he can affect people with them. He looked fast, he looked sharp, he looked measured. But Oleinik has a lot of heart, and he shot on him near the fence. Hunt seemed to be circling out, and he dived right on the low single and climbed up to the back, which is a very awkward sort of takedown. Low singles, that's the way people defend the single there. They just limp leg out. Like if you watch Tyron Woodley versus Maia or Jose Aldo versus everyone, it's push the head down, limp leg out once it gets to a low single. But Oleinik used it well to get up on the back. and then finished with the choke. So yeah, not bad. I thought that main event, despite it be, expecting it to be bad. Generally though, that event was shit. Oh god, that was bad. What was good though was Triple G versus Canelo, which is what I wrote about on Monday because it was really good. Lots of butthurt over the decision. I think that this one, I could see it going to Canelo. I think I started trying to score it, and then I had him. I think it was even by 8. And then the last 2 rounds, I was like, I don't even want to have to score this. This is a lot of responsibility because they're just taking lumps out of each other, and it was really hard to choose winners. And I think it was 11 and 12. But what I did enjoy was Canelo Alvarez actually fighting this time. Last time he went to the ropes and was trying to do his Floyd Mayweather bit, and Floyd Mayweather did that to him because he was opening up with wide rights to the body and really trying to hurt him through his guard. Golovkin in their first fight just stood back and jabbed him, or threw those long, flicky right straights that aren't really like power punches, but kept him right on the end, used tons of volume, and just had him bamboozled. You can't mix up your targets when you're up on top of your feet on the ropes. You can't level change and get to the body. So this time he comes out, stays in the centre of the ring, only hits the ropes for the first time in round 11, and he looked marvellous. He was doing left hooks to the body, left hooks to the head, and the jab, all playing off each other. He does a very nice long left hook on the outside, Canelo. Already had Golovkin, respecting him a bit more in the first round. And what you saw, like I put some gifs of this in the fight, but there was particularly just early in the second round, they'd been picking at each other, and Canelo picked at Golovkin, and then Golovkin swung back with the right hand and left himself off balance, and Canelo just missed getting back in with the counter. But you saw that was the advantage of actually standing and fighting Golovkin, because you're going to get those overcommittals out of him, those attempts to actually hurt you. If you just stand on the ropes and he knows you're waiting to try and counter him, he's going to be cautious and he's going to flick you with the jab and dig the occasional body shot. This time they were actually out in the centre of the ring fighting, and Golovkin got away from himself a bit and started throwing punches that could be come back on with counters. Canelo was really getting to the body well, and I was saying this in my pre-fight piece, it was like Ward versus Kovalev too. You want them to have sharpened up their jab and work on the outside and jab with the jabber a bit, but you also want them to win on variety. They want to do a lot of things while the other guy's just jabbing. And that's what Canelo was doing really well. He was getting to the body a lot. He was jabbing to the body a lot. He was also jabbing with Golovkin, and he was also firing right hands across the top of the jab when he could. A lot of people in their justification of the decision and the commentary team, they were talking about how much Golovkin was backing up. But that, I don't like using that as a criteria because neither of these guys seemed at all concerned about getting hit in the head by the other guy. It was really more trying to change things up. You notice that a lot of Golovkin's hardest, stiffest jabs, and the 1-2 that rocked Canelo, well, not rocked, but hurt him, and allowed Golovkin to flurry on him in round 10 or whatever it was, they came from stepping back. He'd step back and draw Canelo onto the punches. And then Golovkin also did the other thing that we talked about ahead of the first fight. He went to like a true-in fight, head-on-head, a butting of heads, I suppose, but not actually butting. And that's a position where Canelo hasn't been, hasn't shown much in the past. He doesn't like to get his head in. Like, if you clinch Canelo, he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know where to put his head. His infighting is really more flurrying hands from upright position. And, level changing with his legs. But when Golovkin put his head on him, he'd try and hit him with a couple of nice uppercuts, and then he'd move his head back, and Canelo would crack him with the right hand as he was leaving. Real back and forth stuff all the way through. I highly recommend reading the article. I think I just called it Triple G versus Canelo 2 was a masterpiece. It's on Vice Sports. It's also on the Fight Primer. I really enjoyed that fight. I think lived up to the expectations. First fight was good, but the second fight was really good. And then people were getting upset about me saying that it was a fight of the year candidate across all combat sports. Being like, there's better fights on the undercards of UFCs. And you're like, well, no. The reason that name value matters is that it's hard to get a good fighter into a scrap. Who has gotten Gennady Golovkin or Canelo Alvarez into a tit-for-tat scrap and not just been smoked, And that's why who it is and the build-up and not the build-up, but who it is matters to how good the fight is. There are people on any obscure card having wars, but it's a much bigger deal when it's two of the best in the world, or the two best in the world at that weight. Anyway, don't have an awful lot to say about that because I wrote it to death, so go read that. Let's do some questions. Hey Jack, love the podcast and your cheeky British take on all things MMA. Have a couple of questions for you. One, recently on Reddit, someone posted a video of DC throwing a jumping around kick Karate Kid style during the Frank Mir fight. I remember this. I assume this was some type of inside joke for the AKA guys, but it got me thinking, what are other notable horrible strikes or techniques that you remember being used by top tier guys? Two, since I'm Canadian, I must ask about one of my Canuck boys. In a fictional world where Rory MacDonald didn't leave the UFC, how do you see the UFC's welterweight rankings shaping up now? Is Rory the champ at some point? I'll go back to drinking maple syrup and playing hockey now. Keep up the good work and get them t-shirts printed. We did. And then he signs off with Page Bless. In terms of awful techniques, see, now the only ones I can think of are ones that worked, unfortunately, like Brian Ebersol's disastrous cartwheel kick. Just a mess, but he actually knocked a dude out with it. I don't mean cartwheel kick in the sane shy way that people try and copy, where you put one hand to the ground and throw the overhand, almost overarm leg kick or overarm kick with the leg coming from above the opponent. It was actually just literally cartwheeling and letting the legs hit the opponent. It was so bad, but it connects right off the opening bell again in one fight. The other day when I mentioned BJ Penn has pretended that kicks don't exist for however many years, someone was like, well, he did throw a pretty good kick against Diego Sanchez. And that kick is one of the ugliest kicks I've ever seen. The fact that it hits Diego Sanchez in the head and opens up a cut is why people remember it as a great head kick. But the dude, for someone with so much hip flexibility, he can't turn his kick over at all. It's really bad. I've seen a lot of failed spinning back fist and things like that. Spinning back fist, 3 knockouts in UFC history. So you've got to be careful with that, knowing that it's not actually as done a deal as you think it is. There was a really good one at the ACB event the other night. Bet you thought you'd never hear that expression again at the ACB event the other night. No, they put on an event. But yeah, the dude, there was a spinning back fist came in. The dude leaned down behind his shoulder and then completed a turn with a back elbow on the guy who'd just done the back fist. It was absolutely incredible. I've never seen it before in my life. I don't expect to again, to be honest. Like, what an obscure way to counter something. Anytime Valentina Shevchenko does a spinning kick, which is several times a fight, it's always left leg spinning wheel kick or something, and it never comes close. Just needle the Shevchenko fans a bit more. Yeah, no, I'll think of some others, but that's pretty bad. And in terms of Rory MacDonald, I don't know. I think Rory MacDonald has benefited enormously from some downtime. He was fighting killers every month, or every few months rather. He was fighting killers every fight, and he was having real worries about his nose and stuff. And I think getting a softball I don't want to call Paul Daly a softball, but if you are a really good wrestler, Paul Daly's a softball. I think having time to shape up like that, obviously Lima took some lumps out of him too, but I think it's helped doing that, because the Stephen Thompson fight had to be disheartening, because that was just a case of he couldn't get to him. And then watching Stephen Thompson do so badly in these most recent fights, well, not even badly, but just boringly, and not look like a world beater, has to be hard on you. So I don't know where Rory will be. I think, I still think he's got the skills to beat Tyron Woodley, because Tyron Woodley, as much as he's sharpened up, it's still the same few things that he does. And Rory seemed to have an answer for them. So, if he got a title shot, maybe he'd be champion, but I think he still has trouble with Thompson. I'd be interested to see him against Lawler at this point, because Lawler, he's sort of an afterthought in the division now. If he had the rematch with Condit, he'd probably murder him. I don't know. I'd like to see a rematch with Maia, because at least neither of them gets hurt then. The first match was really good fun, actually. Anyway, cheers, Ben. Dear Mr. Slack, after seeing DC, another DC question, use holding and hitting successfully, and Arlovsky slap up Travis Brown with the tattoo, are there any other illegal techniques from striking arts that have yet to make it over to MMA that would be effective? I imagine a classic boxing coach won't be familiar with the tattoo, etc., as it is an illegal punch in boxing, and as such may have never learned/taught it. Would love to get Outlaw Killer Punches, that's the Champ Thomas book, but as it costs £87 on Amazon secondhand. I don't see myself getting it anytime soon. He also asked for a Patreon episode on the sickly, frail 50-kilogram Helio versus the prime 120-kilogram giant Kimura. Brackets, as you can tell, I've only heard the Gracie version. And the events around it that would be interesting, or something on Duran, Hearns, Hagler, Leonard four-way. Also, may I recommend Aldi Jaffa Cakes? They may have a softer sponge, nicer chocolate, and a more tangy orange centre, and be far cheaper. Superior to McVitie's in every way, in my honest opinion. All the best from your Patreon boy, Joshua. I wanted to do something on the Gracie family history for a while. You know, I'm working my way through Choke, CHOQUE, but there are 3 volumes of that, and it's a fucking slog. There was a great documentary, mini-doc rather, that I posted on my Twitter the other day about, was it Rafael dos Santos? Someone like that. A really successful wrestler, catch wrestler, who took the Gracie challenge, humiliated Carlos Gracie, or Carlson Gracie, or whoever it was, and then the Gracie brothers beat on him with a metal pipe 3-on-1, and it made it into the papers. So there's an awful lot of interesting history about the Gracies, and the idea that Helio's frailty is exaggerated so badly now. You know, there are photos of him as a medal-winning swimmer, you know, where he's in great shape. And all this stuff like, oh yeah, he never actually trained with them. He just watched the techniques, but he had such a brilliant understanding. It's this trying to, like, make a mythology out of just some dudes who learned to grapple, you know, and you can respect dudes who just learned to grapple and got good at it. But, you know, why do we have to have this Zen bollocks? It's like, Hickson Gracie now does exclusively like gun defense. And you're like, this is the bollocks that you guys rooted out when you proved that no one is doing enough sparring and live training. Anyway, DC, illegal punches are the old saw punch to the back of the head. If someone bends down and you throw a right hook, deliberately missing them, and then drop your forearm on the back of the head. Love that one. Kota Uchi, the old forearm strikes. You know, you can watch Uechi guys break baseball bats with that. But yeah, you can throw an overhand like that, catch with the wrist behind the head. Back of the head with the wrist is just vicious. Throwing a straight arm swing into the opponent's guard hurts. One that no one does in MMA yet, but might catch on one day, is covering people's eyes. Because if you cover someone's eyes, they can't see the punch coming, and then you can crack them in the jaw. That's something that dudes used to do out the clinch in boxing, when you had like the open glove and you could sort of like grab the whole face. The open glove is in the thumb, not tethered. But I could see that working from guard. You know, just cover the opponent's eyes and then elbow them in the jaw when at irregular intervals. I'm also desperate to see someone bring in Bat Nelson's half scissor left hook, which is delivered with the point of the thumb and the index finger. And this was when the gloves were untethered too. You know, he believed that Battling Nelson says in his own autobiography that punch and mastering that punch changed him from like an average fighter into a world champion. And he beat Joe Gans 3 times. So he knew what he was talking about. But yeah, he just said like a 6-inch punch delivered with the index finger and the thumb simultaneously into the liver. And he could put guys down with that. And, you know, there's plenty of accounts of him doing so in professional matches. So that'd be crazy. You could see someone do that with the no gloves on. Mark Hatmaker has a really interesting variation where he uses the index finger middle knuckle rather than the finger itself. Cheers, Josh. Hi, Jack. Given the circumstances surrounding Haru Mafuji's retirement, you mean when he was framed? Maybe it could be a jumping off point for a Fights Gone By history episode for us Patreon boys. Sumo, Mongolians, cultural friction, corruption, weirdness, violence, etc. Anyway, keep up the good work, Alex. I would love to do that. I've got a few books on sumo. Yeah, the hard thing is finding the footage. You know, generally on YouTube they're very good at putting up the footage, but you have so many matches between so many people that it can be very hard to get through all of them. But yeah, I would love to do something on sumo history, particularly the ancient history, which is sort of like part myth and part real. You know, there's the first Yokozuna is supposed to be like 8 feet tall, but obviously was a real person because we've got this tradition, or at least there was a real Yokozuna at some point. Because at some point between this mythical guy and the modern day, there are plenty of real guys that we can trace, you know, so that would be very interesting to do. Anyway, bit of a slow week this week. We've got an event coming up. Young McKee is fighting on Bellator. and Rafael Lovato Jr., AJ McKee rather. So I was thinking about doing something about them later in the week. I will probably write something about Kid Yamamoto tomorrow when I've got my thoughts together a bit more. Friday's card or Saturday's card, whatever it is, Anders versus Santos. That's a good fight, like it. Santos, the explosive striker, Eric Anders, very much more about when he's at his best, he's about ring pressure and really punishing takedown attempts. He gets guys towards the fence, throws the powerful left hand at them, and then when they duck on the takedown, he puts in the quarter Nelson, strips his leg free, and tries to knee him on the way up. You've got Alex Oliveira versus Carlo Paderosa, who I know almost nothing about, but I like Alex Oliveira, so fair enough. But that's the number 16 welterweight in the world, according to Tapology, versus number 87. That seems a bit strange. But then we are down in Sao Paulo, so there might just be some softballs. However, Sam Alvey is going to knock out Antonio Hajiro Nogueira, so there's that. And then Renan Barão versus Andre Ewell, who you've never heard of. He's 13-4. God damn, what do we need to do to get Renan Barão a convincing win? Randa Marcos is on the card. Charles Oliveira against another unknown lightweight. God, this card is blatant, isn't it? Evan Dunham takes his last fight against Francisco Trinaldo. That's sleeper, possible fight of the night, that. Sad that Evan Dunham's retiring. You know, if he gets a good win here, expect him to rescind on that immediately. You got Sergio Moraes versus Ben Saunders. A couple of old boys, like that. Talos Latis versus Hector Lombard. Oh, way, maybe Hector Lombard will get knocked out again. Everyone loves that. Yeah, that's pretty much all that's jumping out at me from that card. Not bad. Anyway, if you are a Patreon boy, the Opium War Patreon episode is up today. It's on the Patreon. Just go have a look. It was a daunting task, this thing. I bit off more than I can chew, so I cut it off around about the point that I thought was a good cutting point for that episode. We're going to be doing Muhammad Ali versus Sonny Liston very soon, returning to the heavyweight championship, which I dropped off on Floyd Patterson because we were getting to Ali and I thought that's quite daunting. I'll take a break and do some other stuff. But now I'm feeling ready to do it, so I'm going to do that. If you want to support the podcast or get those episodes, join the Patreon. If you want a Blacksplosive t-shirt, they actually exist. We have a new store on Teespring. I'm linking it on the Fight Primer as we speak. We have 4 t-shirts available. One, boxed up by order of His Fistic Majesty. We've got a slightly simpler boxed up one, which has the Slacky logo on. We got Juice to the Tits, and we got Blacksplosive, and all of those have the Slacky signature on so that people know that you are a Jack Slack person. Go and get one, and patrol bars looking for other Slacky fans. If you want to send a question or a comment to the podcast, fightsgonbypodcast@gmail.com. If you want to buy the book Notorious, go for it. I'm your boy Jack Slack, and I will catch you next week. Cheers!